today we are going to be talking about Chris Rock's astrology chart. And I know that this topic is a little dated because this whole slapping incident with Will Smith, it happened back in March of 2022. But I thought it would be really interesting to look at because there was a lot of people after the whole slapping incident occurred. There were a lot of people that were shocked, of course, including myself. But there were also a lot of people that seemed to believe that maybe this was some sort of publicity stunt, or maybe it was scripted because it was the Academy Awards, and maybe this was just some sort of, stunt to gain more notoriety, so to speak. But, based on the chart I see this as a tremendously humiliating experience for Chris Rock. And I'm not excusing anything that Chris Rock said that offended Will Smith about his spouse, but we can look at the incident because this incident, it was a period of the sixth lord, which represents emotional enemies or emotional trauma, which happen in our lives when we're humiliated, when we're talked down to, when we're bullied, when something like that happens. And what I was going to show you, we all have that in our charts. We all have people that, for whatever reason, we go through shocking events where we feel humiliated, whether it was as a child on the school playground, or even as adults, if we go to a job where we have a boss berate us in front of all of our other coworkers. It's the same type of flavor with this sixth from moon type of aspect that we see going on in Chris Rock's chart when we see this whole incident happen. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit about his chart in general. So it's really interesting to take a look at. For those of you guys that are new to my channel, of course, like always, please like and subscribe. The goal is 10,000 subscribers. And those of you that are interested in a reading, it's 40% off right now if you use codename Thor at checkout. So check for details down below. We're going to go to the chart here, and let's take a look at Chris Rock's chart. For me personally, I always enjoyed his comedy. So I always thought he was really funny. So let's take a look at Chris Rock's chart. The first thing we're going to notice is he's a Pisces ascendant. And so Pisces tend to be very artistic because their consciousness is almost in a dreamlike type of state because Pisces represents the natural 12th house when we think about it. And you'll notice that Jupiter is in the second house of Aries. So that's his chart ruler, okay? His chart ruler, Jupiter, rules the 10th house as well. So this is an important career planet for Chris Rock. Now, I'm just going to point out a few small things for you guys right now. We're just going to point out a few things, and then we'll actually go into the astrology of what happened during this whole slapping incident during March of 2022. Now, if you notice, his 10th lord and his first lord are in the second house, and the second house has to do with like your family of origin, your saved assets. It even has to do with things like your face and speech. And it's something to note that he's making primary, his money, his income comes through using his speech, using his voice as a comedian, or doing voiceovers, or, showing up in movies. I remember that movie Grown Ups, I thought was quite funny. So he's making money through his voice and his face. So you'll see a lot of people that are performers have some sort of planet in the second house because that represents your voice and your speech. We'll also look and notice that his moon is in the second house, which could represent his mother was predominantly what formed his values as a child. So if any of you guys have sun or moon in the second house, it will usually represent which parent had a predominant effect on you, which parent's values really rubbed off on you. In this case, it would be more so the mother in Chris Rock's chart. Another thing I wanted to bring up was in Chris Rock's chart, Chris's chart, like I know Chris. Let's go to the 7th house here of Virgo, and Mars is there. So this can show issues with marriage partners and even business partners. And we're going to find out that this house was activated during this whole slapping incident. So notice that Mars activated. Mars is in not good. It's not in good dignity in the sign of Virgo. It's in an enemy house, since Mercury and Mars are not friends. So that house was activated. We'll go more into that when we talk about the incident. But at the very least, you know, if somebody has Mars in their seventh house, it could show a very restless marriage when you get married, or long-term partners that are just very restless, maybe a little argumentative. If you don't have the energies, you know, if you don't have an outlet for all those energies, it can create issues there. The other thing I wanted to point out in Chris Rock's chart is he's also got Mercury. Mercury's in the 11th house, which shows, again, making money through voice, media, communications. And the real kicker here is going to be, you notice that Mercury is next to the sun, and you notice Mercury is next to Venus. Well, okay, Venus rules the 8th house, and then Sun rules the 6th house. And remember, those are the malefic houses in Vedic astrology. So this is really influencing Mercury. And we're going to find out he was in a Mercury period when this incident happened. So both the 6th Lord and the 8th Lord were influencing this whole event when it happened. So there's a lot of money to be made with Mercury in the 11th house. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of money to be made through that. But with the 8th Lord and 6th Lord there's a lot of struggle associated with making that money. So our charts may indicate we can make a lot of money doing something, but yeah, there's a lot of struggle associated with it. One more thing is, we're going to notice that in Chris Rock's chart, he's got Rahu in the 3rd house. And apparently, I was reading a Wikipedia article on Chris Rock right before I went live here. Apparently, in 2020, he announced he had some sort of disorder, learning disability, or learning disorder. And I don't know what the name of the disorder is, but that he can't really recognize nonverbal social cues. Okay, so we know that like 80–90% of communication happens through nonverbal gestures. And it's very interesting because I kind of read that and I didn't really think much of it until I saw Rahu in the 3rd house. And Rahu in the 3rd house, not just Rahu in the 3rd house, but the 3rd house, what it represents is it represents day-to-day scripted conversations. So if you guys ever are in an elevator with people and it's like, oh, how's the weather? Or, you know, did you see that the Yankees won the game the other day? You know, that small talk and the little gestures you make to people, well, that's all ruled by the 3rd house. And in Chris Rock's chart, Rahu being in the 3rd house shows that in this lifetime, he's trying to learn more about that. He's trying to learn more about those gestures, communicating, small talk. He's trying to learn about that in this lifetime. So I found it very interesting that apparently he can't read nonverbal cues from people. So that's very interesting. So let's go to the slides one more time here, and then we're going to talk about the incident. Mercury in the 11th house, though, and Jupiter in the 2nd house, it's a really good money for Chris Rock. So despite everything, really good money, really good success as being a comedian, as an actor. There's a lot of success indicated there. All right, let's talk about the slap incident. And you guys are probably well aware of what happened, but let's go through it really quick in case some of you maybe you weren't really paying attention. So March 27, 2022, at the 94th Academy Awards, Chris Rock was a host, and Chris Rock made a joke to Jada Pinkett Smith about the shaved head. What was allusion? He made a joke about something about G.I. Jane, which, if you guys remember the movie with G.I. Jane, it was Demi Moore had a shaved head, and Will Smith's wife has a shaved head because she has a medical condition. Well, Chris Rock made a joke that maybe there'll be a G.I. Jane 2 and alluded to Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, being, the actress that portrays that role. Well, anyways, the incident apparently caused Will Smith the fume. Will Smith approaches the stage, and it's a slap. He literally slaps him, and you see during this whole incident, Chris Rock is absolutely stunned. The look on his face, I can't forget that look. of absolute shock and stun, and then not even really knowing how to react at that moment when the slap happened. When I saw the video, when people were questioning it, I saw the video and I was like, that was real. That was someone absolutely shocked. They just got slapped in front of millions of viewers. But the chart really does indicate this was a very heavy emotional situation. So I don't agree with the people that think it was some sort of publicity stunt. Let's talk about, let me see if there's anything more about the incident. So Will Smith walks on the stage, slaps Chris Rock in front of millions of viewers, and the aftermath was a media frenzy. Many condemned the act, of course, because it was an act of violence, and then some even thought it was a publicity stunt. So that's what we're going to really talk about with the chart right now. Okay, so the main thing to realize is during this whole incident in March 27th, when he got slapped, this was happening during a Mercury bhukti. And for those of you guys that are new with Vedic astrology, there's these Mahadashas, which are really big planetary periods, and bhuktis, which are still the smaller planetary periods. But bhuktis can still be, you know, a couple years. They can be 1 to 3 years long. So they're still kind of long, but they're a sub period of a Mahadasha. So let's go back to the slide. So he was in a Mercury bhukti during this time, and he entered that February 15th, 2021 to September 4th, 2023. So let's talk about that, because that was really what was going on. So when you're going through a bhukti or a Mahadasha, you have to realize the planet is really shading your whole experience of what's happening in your life. And I'm talking your whole experience, like even how people treat you, how you perceive they're treating you. All this is influenced by the planetary rulers of what's ruling whatever bhukti you're in. So let's take a look at the chart here. So he was in a Mercury bhukti during this time, and we were talking about that for a minute. But remember what I told you was, we know Mercury is a neutral planet in general. Okay, Mercury is very neutral, but it's influenced by the planets next to it. So we got Venus and the sun next to it. Well, okay, Venus rules the 8th house, and then sun rules the 6th house here. So these are going to be your houses right here. Like 6th house represents conflict. It represents fights. It represents aggression. It represents accusations. It represents things like car accidents. And then we got the 8th house. This is trauma. This is something that comes out of nowhere. You guys ever had something come out of nowhere? Something happened very suddenly? That's going to be 8th house, where there's absolute shock. So 8th house is associated with that, being shocked at what's happening. So that's what was going on. So Mercury is being influenced by the 6th house and the 8th house. So this is a very volatile period. Even though Mercury in and of itself, Mercury seems like it would be an okay planet. If we look in the chart, it rules the 4th and 7th houses. So it doesn't seem like it would be normally somewhat of a benign planet, but in this case, not really. So there was a lot of factors at play. So usually even with that, we might not see something so dramatic. But let's take a look at the houses. We also got to realize when we're analyzing a bhukti, not only do we have to look at where the planet it is and what it's being influenced by, but we have to look at the houses it rules. And look, it rules the 7th house, and it rules the 4th house. So this is a lot about business partners. It's a lot about even things like property, real estate, the mother. All these things are indicated by this time period of Chris Rock's life. Now, what's interesting, look at this. Mars is being activated. So we have the 8th house. 6th house is being because of the sun and Venus next to Mercury. And then we got Mars being activated, which is the natural planet of aggression. Okay. And what I find very interesting is 7th house here. Well, what does that represent? Business partners. It represents peers. Now, I don't know how close Chris Rock and Will Smith are in age. I didn't check, but they would be somewhat peers. They're both kind of, Will Smith is known as an actor and a comedian on some level, especially because of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So they're both peers, and that's what 7th house represents. Business associates, peers. They both work in the same industry. Mars. So it was just this whole brew, I guess, toxic stew. The 7th lord being activated, the 8th lord being activated, Mars being activated in the 7th house. And then I found out that transiting Mars was in the 7th house during that day. So there's a lot of factors that take some really major event like this. And let's top the cherry on this. Let's look at from your moon, and all of you guys should look into this in your charts. You should learn about what is 6 from moon. So if we make your moon a lagna and we count 6 houses from it, look at this. In Chris Rock's chart, this is 6 from moon, and this was being activated. This is still currently being activated during his Mercury bhukti. 6th from moon. These are emotional enemies. Okay. So whether or not we know, there may have been a past life conflict, believe it or not, between Chris Rock and Will Smith, whatever past life they had together. 6 from moon represents enemies we have from past lives that come, and they might attack us in all sorts of ways. Emotional, they might accuse of wrongdoing. They do something that hurts us or harms us in this current lifetime because of something that occurred in a past life. There was a former cause. So we all have that in our chart. We all have people we've harmed or we've done something negative in a past life to. And in this life, we are reaping some of the karma of that. So when you're looking at 6 from moon, you want to look at what house is it? And you also want to look at if there's any planets in that house to really look at what type of agents are representative of 6 from moon. So in Chris Rock's chart, 6 from moon is going to be primarily business partners and marriage partners and long-term romantic relationships. Those are going to be the type of relationships that cause him the most emotional distress. Okay, and there's Mars there. Mars can represent competitors, and it can represent siblings, okay, brothers and so forth. So that's going to be a lot of the emotional conflict agents in Chris Rock's life. And this whole incident occurred during 6 from moon. Okay, so this is a very impactful emotional, whether or not, even if he had a very straight face during the incident, right now, this is one of those situations that if you can't forgive it and you can't heal from this situation, you can start harboring a lot of resentment. And it can start creating a lot of suffering because it represents emotional suffering. And we all are trying to overcome suffering in samsara. This is part of the 3D game we're playing. Let me take us back to the slideshow. But what I was going to say, with Mercury being in the 11th house, one more thing about that. Mercury's in the 11th house. He still's made a lot of money during this period. So I know after the incident, his shows have been sold out. So they've been saying that they've been sold out. The prices of the tickets have been going up, where I think some people are paying like $1,000 for these tickets. So even though he went through all this trauma and being embarrassed and humiliated in front of millions of people, he's made a lot of money out of it. But you might ask, at what cost? Is it worth being humiliated and be suffering just because you make a lot of money? Well, you guys will have to ask yourselves that. How much of a thick skin would you have for that? 6 from moon, I wanted to make a few comments more on that because I feel like this is an important lesson through this whole incident. So 6 from moon, these agents can cause severe emotional disruption, trauma, invalidation, humiliation, victimizer behaviors. So for example, if you guys have if your 6th house for moon is the 10th house, it would be like bosses, it would be like authority figures. Even the government might be a 6 from moon type figure towards you, where you feel like they're harming you in some sort of way. If it's the 4th house, it could represent, or the moon is there, it could represent some emotional issues like with your mother, or with mother-like figures, or with your homeland. So you got to look at what the house and what the house indicates when you look at 6 houses for moon. And you can get an idea of the type of agents and figures that represent 6 from moon. Let's go back to the slideshow. And so what I was going to say is these represent our own unhealed conflict and represent people we may have harmed in past lives. They are our difficult teachers. Do we go deeper into the blame game of samsara, or do we rise above it? So it's easy what I was going to say is it's easy for all of us. The easy road is just to blame somebody, attack them, and to hold on to resentment and anger. That's the easy road. In fact, actually, it might be more difficult because it's causing a lot of suffering. But that's the unaware road, when you're just starting to harbor more resentment, more anger, and you're trying to get revenge. That's what 6 from Moon will do. You're trying to get revenge. You're trying to vent out your anger. But the higher road to all of this is, can you actually get to a point where you don't excuse what people do to you, but can you be a compassionate observer? Can you get a little more neutrality? Can you realize that if someone's harmed you in this life, they're doing it from ignorance? They're doing it because they may hold an ignorant belief that they need to harm others to get ahead in life, or they're repeating some sort of behavior that may have been inflicted on them. It doesn't justify what they do. We can forgive people, but maybe the behaviors, we can criticize behaviors, but not criticize people. That's one of the important lessons when we're thinking of how to deal with karmic enemies or karmic disruptions in our life. Let's go back to the chart. What I wanted to bring up with you guys from now on, so this is a very emotionally impactful event. So whatever Chris Rock is doing, I haven't seen him in anything recently. I'm assuming he's still doing comedy shows, but this was severely emotionally traumatic. Okay, this is definitely something that he's stewing on. He's thinking a lot, quite of a bit. And I predict for 2023, we're going to see Saturn changing signs here. He's going to be in this Mercury period till the end of 2023, September of 2023, to be accurate, when he's going to enter a K2 period. He's going to enter Saturn, this Saturn period in 2023, and he's going to be into that period till, he's going to be in that period till March of 2025. So 2.3 years. And he's also going to enter a K2 period. This can represent things like retirement. It can represent getting away from everything. It can even represent things like forgiveness, the 12th house. So we might even see him retire or start to, this incident could have sparked a lot of things within Chris Rock, where he's going to maybe want to step away from being in the limelight. And a lot of this is as a result of this situation, because we can see the follow-up and the chain reaction in the chart. You know, sometimes when we get enough conflict in our lives, we kind of get the message like, okay, maybe it's time to just move on. And sometimes that's what we do. But 2023, we may see Chris Rock less in the limelight when Saturn enters Aquarius. Saturn will be in the 12th house. This suggests a period of reflection, private environments, being away from prying eyes. It also does represent retirement. Retirement, getting away. In a lot of ways, the 12th house represents forgiveness and release of things. Okay. The 12th house is where, when we go to the 12th house in our charts, if we're going to a Bhukti or Saturn's transiting our 12th house, it's a time of prayer, penance. It's a time of really getting your life, forgiving people from the past. And it's really a way of balancing our lives so that we can be happier in the future if you take advantage of the opportunity. You know, there's times in your life where you're alone or you're isolated, and it's a more spiritual period of your life. And it's an opportunity and a blessing that the divine is giving you. And it's giving you that time to reflect on your life. It's giving you that time to forgive the past. It's giving you that time to actually make peace with things. Because, you know, like one of the precepts here, one of the 5 reflections is that we can't escape dying one day, and we can't escape growing old. These are things we can't escape from, but can we make peace with our life through the 12th house? Of course. And so that's why we have teachings, dharmic teachings and spiritual practices to help us have an easier and more smooth path in life. So let me take a look at if there's any questions. Thank you guys for being here. Devika, thank you for being here. Thank you everyone for your support, of course. And I appreciate all of you that have been purchasing readings, of course, and it helps support what I do in my channel. So I appreciate that much. Let me know what you guys think of the whole incident, or if there's any other charts that you would like me to take a look at and read. If I can find a birth time, I usually will be more than happy to do them if there's nothing going on in the current events. Let me know down below. So thank you guys so much for watching here, and take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.